Welcome back. Welcome back to our podcast, Firm Grasp on an Empty Bag. I'm Anthony Citrolo. I'm glad you're here, and I'm also glad to have my good friend Todd Ringler, who I'll introduce in a minute, with me. Todd and I, we were trying to figure it out. We go back probably at least 20 years, and we've always, it's interesting. We've always been kind of the same mindset, working in the same direction. Haven't worked together as much as we probably should, but hopefully we will going forward. I started the podcast, and when I started NYBB, we were looking at folks who wanted to exit their company. And the question we always ask is, are you ready to exit your company? It's probably your biggest investment. In fact, statistically, they say that about 80% of most owners' wealth is trapped in their business. And that could be a scary thought unless you're prepared. Sometimes we look at it and we say, well, what do you mean by prepared? And we'll talk a little bit about that with Todd. And I think for the years of long and hard work that most people put into their company and their business, most folks are not working 40-hour weeks. They're working more. They invest their own personal capital. I think it's important that people have an exit strategy. They do some planning as it relates to that. And when the day comes, whether it's your choice or someone else's choice, you should really be ready to sell that company, and you want to get maximum value out of it. We've had recently a lot of situations where buyers are actually knocking on the door of folks and saying, hey, I'd like to buy your company. And they come to us and say, they want to buy my company. I'm really not even prepared mentally or economically to sell. And the economic part is really a problem. But you work through it, and I think it's important. So I welcome Todd because Todd, aside from being a fellow CPA, Todd has the CVA credential, a certified valuation analyst. He's done a lot of valuation work. And I think it's great because he combines that with the CPA part of it. And then he's also a partner in a TAB group, which is the alternative board, and they help folks in their business. So Todd, welcome. I just wanted to give you a little chance to kind of embellish a little bit your background in terms of how you started, what your mindset was, and also, what you try to achieve as you work with people. And then we have a couple of questions that I think would be good to talk about.
That's great. Anthony, first off, thank you so much for having me. It's always great to see you, even if it's not in person, but in the new two-dimensional Jetsons world. To add a little bit to where I'm coming from and where I'm going and what I'm looking to do with helping business owners, maximize their freedom and their exit. Really what you're saying is their the current part of cash flow and the future part of cash flow. I was a chef and a restaurateur in a prior life, and then kind of became partners in, bars, restaurants, things like that. And at 20-something years old with two little kids, I got a hernia, I hurt myself. And it was kind of like, do I want to be working nights, weekends, and holidays? Said no. I looked at death and taxes, and I actually chose taxes. Went to college, got the degree, got a master's in tax, worked at the big accounting firms where I was doing consolidated tax return work, big groups. What do big groups do? They buy and sell companies. So I kind of found valuation accidentally around 99, 2000, and was working with these valuation people and found this way more interesting work than 1502 and the regs thereunder for anybody that cares about tax returns that we used to send to the IRS in 20 paper boxes.
Sure.
So that's kind of how the valuation piece became. I opened up an accounting business valuation firm, which is when we met, probably around 2000, 2002, and have grown. Sold the accounting firm in 2009. Have grown Commodores Consulting, helping business owners understand their value, grow their value. And then a logical progression was to get into the alternative board. I was actually a member of the alternative board when I had my accounting firm. And my current partner, Jackie Grenay, was my coach and facilitator. I sold my accounting firm, no longer a business owner, and I became a facilitator for the alternative board. And a number of years ago, we decided to, make me her exit plan. And, here I am. I now own the alternative board. Waters Consulting, which does business valuation, machinery and equipment appraisal, business value improvement services. Yeah, and Ringler and Associates. I have a small tax and accounting practice that I kept. With a few clients that didn't want me to go, I should say. So
it's interesting. You talk about the alternative board. I find that all of our business owners, need a board of some sort, right? And I think sometimes the board, unfortunately, is me, myself, and I, right, for a lot of these folks, and
sure.
that doesn't necessarily give you the best possibilities. And sometimes the board consists of them and their CPA, okay, or them and their attorney. But just talk a little bit about the value of having a board of a group of people together who are kind of going to assist you as kind of what the alternative board does, not as a promotion for that, but I think business owners need to think about how they're going to increase value. And sometimes they have problems that they go through in their business, and they don't have necessarily all the solutions. So I think that's a perfect kind of segue to kind of talk a little bit about what the value add there is, and then maybe how you interact with it.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you for the opportunity. But look, at the end of the day, the alternative board is taking a group of non-competing business owners, putting them at a table once a month, some structure, but a lot of here's my issue, here's my opportunity, here's my threat, here's my concern. A lot of business education. But as one of my clients said to me recently, he goes, I need to get out of my ecosystem. My people are telling me yes, and that's not helping me grow. So a lot of what we do is leadership, if you will, communication, leadership training, helping business owners understand how to involve their team properly, how to get better vision, how to plan and build alignment in an organization. Along with that, there's the coaching aspect of it. But when you put, 8 or 10 business owners at a table and you ask a kind of question of, what's the biggest challenge in your organization and what do you plan to do about it? And then we talk about setting a goal and being held accountable for those goals. It becomes a little bit more different than I'm running the business by me, myself, and I.
Yeah. And, it's interesting because, when we work with owners who sell their company, oftentimes they're sold to private equity companies. And a lot of times they have a board there, and the owner becomes part of that board, the advisory board, to kind of chart the next step for the corporation, for the company, in terms of what it is. And oftentimes when people see larger corporations have boards, they have board of directors, they have board of advisors. So, I think it's important for folks who are looking at perhaps an exit. Let's say they're looking at an exit 3 years, 5 years, 7 years down the road, to kind of surround themselves with those folks. And I think that's key. But what I wanted to ask you is, when you're looking at that, put the board is great. When you're listening to it, what are some of the biggest issues that you hear talked about in business today, and talk about them as they affect that ultimate value?
Well, the biggest issue in business currently is people. Whether it's finding people, whether it's finding quality people, whether it's are they hybrid, are they virtual, are they in the office, are they at location, are they not? The adaptation that's had to be made in the last 2 years as a result of COVID has really stressed a lot of businesses. But business owners that have embraced technology and expanded and opened their minds are seeing better results. Expectations have to be managed, but that's probably the biggest challenge currently. When we start talking about, exiting and maximizing business value, then it gets back to, who is your leadership team and what are they actually doing? As you know, business value is a combination of a number of things. It's revenue, it's the growth of that revenue, and all of that's affected by risk, whether it's systemic or unsystemic, inside the company or outside the company, and the timeline that's to happen. So when they start thinking about exiting, are they really looking at how they can maximize the value of their company, aligning it, creating that vision of where they want to be? Are they able to diagnose problems? I mean, that's always an issue that I run into. That you don't know what you don't know, and a lot of times you don't know what kind of a problem you have. And again, a $1 million business or a $5 million revenue business is going to be a lot different than a 25 or a 50 or $100 million business. And then whether or not, obviously, they're selling a product or providing a service is going to have a lot to do with it as well.
So we find, it's interesting when we have potential buyers and potential folks who want to acquire a company. They have some key questions, and one of the key questions surrounds, it's interesting. So they always want to know about things like concentration of customers, right? They always look at that. They always want to see what the cash flow of the business is. They want to see good financials. We could talk about that. But one of the big things they want to see, they ask, who's your management team? Who's your leadership team? And if you're the leadership team and you're the management team and you don't have anybody really who's a trusted person who can hand off, you've actually devalued your company. It's amazing how that's happened. And I see those as specific areas where it's been difficult to get folks to understand that. Is there I don't know if you have a secret message, or is there a way you can actually, can you show somebody that in an evaluation, or how do we impart that information to people? Because it's hard to get through to them.
Depending upon whether or not they know everything or they don't, or they're willing to be open or not, every business has got a number of challenges, that leadership team being one of them, and the alignment of the leadership team and how they operate together, right? Or do they even operate together? And we find, I'm sure you find it in the smaller companies, the under 50 million, a lot of times there's no cohesion and there's no rowing at the same time in the same direction because everybody's in their silo and nothing gets aggregated. So, when you start to, either bring in a professional facilitator or you bring some kind of structure to growing a business, what is the vision and the culture of the business? Does it really work? Are the people aligned with the vision and the culture? What are our advantages? All of those things come from leadership and go down to the rank and file. And if leadership's not communicating effectively or not setting that path, it's definitely going to affect the value. That kind of looks at the operational value driver of, the company overview and how are their operations? What is their senior management doing? So, lots of different areas to look at.
And it really applies to smaller companies. So we looked at our company about a year and a half ago. And as you know, I had a previous partner who retired. I have other partners now. And we said, gee, what's going to take us to the next level? And, I was thinking, I'm not, I'm going to exit at some point. I'm not getting younger, right? And we went through a whole EOS program, which I think helped us define duties. Sometimes you find partners who have, they run a business pretty efficiently, but there's really no delineation in terms of who is responsible for what. And as you try to grow the business, I think it's important to get in that direction, and I see what you mean about leadership because we did it. But I think it would be well served for people to, look at a coach.
Sure.
You've coached a lot of folks, and sometimes people think, oh, what do I need a coach for? So I just wanted to throw that at you. I know it wasn't on a prescribed list of questions or anything, right? But I think it's important because you're good at that. And I think people have to know that perhaps listening to a coach or having a coach advise them, an outside, set of ears and set of eyes, and what do you bring to the table when you do that kind of thing?
Okay. So I'm going to back up and then go forward. So you did EOS, and that whole system is an amazing system. I was an EOS implementer, but when they changed their model, I had to give that up. But I use a thing called Strat Pro. The alternative board has a similar process. It's 14 workshops instead of 5 days. It's half-day units, and but again, the same kind of thing. Involving a professional facilitator with a proven methodology to bring out the best thinking of the leadership team. Alignment, vision, diagnosing, planning, executing, and then optimizing, and planning what's going to be next. Where do we want to go? So as far as those components, if you align all of those components, the theory is all boats are going to rise, or the boat itself is going to rise and the tide's going to go up. that dovetails into the coaching. And the thing that I can say about coaching is what my coach recently said to me when we were talking about client acquisition and helping people is most people that have coaches know or recognize that they are benefiting from them and they need them. It's the people that don't have coaches that don't see the value. So how do you bring a horse to water? Well, coaches do certain things and they don't do other things. And at least from my perspective, it's my job to help you recognize how you can improve by asking a lot of questions, by certainly suggesting things. I never tell anyone to do anything because it's not my place. It's your stuff, but I can certainly help you to recognize and improve your attributes and recognize your defects. And, they always say, well, why are we working on our defects or our deficiencies? But being aware of them and being able to delegate those away. It's not about treating and diagnosing dysfunction. It's really using active listening to make informed decision-making help as a coach. So
are you involved in the actual business operation when you're doing that? I mean, how deeply involved do you get? Are you, for instance, looking at financial information, or are you just taking your cue from the owner? I mean, give me an idea of how involved someone gets.
Well, that's a great question, and thank you for it. As a CPA, I have to have the financial information. I really can't help you if I don't know what the numbers are. And as you know, if you can measure it, you can manage it. If you can't measure it, you're really not managing anything. So the financial statements is always a start. I could take a look at 3 years of financial statements in about 30 minutes, have a good idea if the company's going in a good direction or not a good direction. As someone that's looked at companies like 400 or 500 valuations in the last 22 years and helped hundreds of business owners move their business and personal needles forward, it's got to be financially driven, but it's also the strategic thinking and the execution. A lot of business owners can't get out of their own way. We help them to recognize that and get out of your own way, hiring operational managers and operational executives and being able to delegate some of those non-critical leadership ownership tasks. Mm-hmm. It's key. And when that happens and the clients accept and are willing to change, that's when the results really happen. Yeah. If you're not willing to change, then I'm really not going to work with you more likely than not, or I'm going to recognize that. And that's kind of, go ahead. Sorry.
We routinely, and this is interesting because we routinely have owners who, are very involved in their company. And when you really look at what they put into the company, how many hours they put in the company, we look at, and we can get into the valuation part of it in a little while, but we look at it as what do we need to replace that owner, right? If he or she doesn't have a real management team, first of all, and he or she is working 70 or 80 hours a week, I mean, the replacement of that person is almost impossible to a certain degree.
It's two people more likely than not. And again, those are the kind of people that don't believe, in my experience and possibly in your experience, that anyone can help them or would understand. I'm working with someone right now. He's 57. He said 2.5 years. He goes, I am going to be semi-retired. I'm going to be out golfing. I'm going to be out doing business development. My organization is going to run on its own. He's at that point. He's hired the people. He's got them pretty much locked up in terms of great salaries, great benefits, a really good work environment. And they work hard, but they also produce results. And he's gotten to that point over a 10-year period, but he also realized 5 years ago that he had this goal of at 60, I don't want to do this anymore. So if you don't have a goal, that's the first point, right? And how many people actually set goals and then hold themselves accountable to the goals, which is a big part of what the board, the alternative board that you are part of, does. We set goals on a monthly basis based on the conversations and the discussions or the educational piece, and obviously different areas need different types of goals. But from an owner's perspective, without a doubt, Anthony, the owner, the more valuable business is the business that the owner does not work at.
And the marketplace, I could tell you from being in the transaction world, the marketplace for that owner that you just described is tremendous. In fact, the owner who is not operating his or her business that way may find themselves without a market for the most part. They may find themselves almost not unsellable, but really unsellable at a price that's not going to embarrass them, quite frankly.
Exactly.
And people look very carefully. The marketplace is ripe now. There's still fairly good multiples being paid out there. There's still a buyer interest. We're a little affected now by rising interest rates, which affect the ROI of a company and affect the structure of a deal. Having said that, there's still plenty of cash out there that wants to buy quality companies, but they're really picky about it. So what I wanted to do is just shift a little to the valuation side of it, right? So you put your valuation hat on a little bit, and you've probably seen things change in valuation to a certain extent, but let's talk about some of the things that don't change, some of the things that people look at that really are the kind of the cement, the foundation parts of when you're looking at valuation, what is important. This way the audience knows what is important, and maybe they can kind of look at their company and say, gee, do I check any or all of the boxes when somebody's going to look at me from a valuation standpoint?
Okay, great. So value comes, as I said earlier, and this value really comes from earnings and the multiple, right? And I got an X multiple or a Y multiple, whatever it is. And that, as you know, as a valuation professional, that multiple is based on a number of factors, but the majority of those factors have to do with the risk associated with the growth and the continuance of that earning stream, right? So we can work both sides of this equation. So I'm going to work the multiple side first. We want to increase the multiple. We want to reduce the risk, right? So we want to look at how is the organization set up? How are your human resources? How are our financials being used? What is our customer satisfaction level? All of our contracts and our legal things are buttoned up. We've got a serious sales and marketing team that knows how to operate together. They don't fight with each other, which I'm sure you've seen, and they are able to, as a group, as a leadership group, and as the different departments, they're able to innovate. They're always looking at something new and trying to figure things out. So when you have all of those things, that's going to lower the risk and increase the multiple. Does that make sense? Right? To you, I know it does, right?
Sure.
Right. And then the other side of the coin is the earnings, right? So what do we want to do? Well, we want to maximize EBITDA. At the end of the day, it's really all about cash flow. What are people being paid on in terms of that multiple? And how do we maximize cash flow? And that comes back to a really solid plan and just normal good business practices, managing receivables, managing payables, obviously having a sales and marketing plan that's people are being held accountable for. We're really big with the alternative board in setting goals for the individuals in the team, and then the key performance indicators being managed to make sure that we're getting to where we want to go, right? It's not going to happen all the time, but execution, turning that vision and those goals, which turn into the KPIs, turning them into reality, increasing the revenues, right? That's the two sides of the coin,
The one question I have too is, we with COVID, we've had 2 years, a year and a half, whatever you want to call it, of almost unpredictable results. Some businesses have done much better than expected. Some have done much more poorly. We routinely now are having folks who say, hey, Justin, we need quality projections on your business. And projections for a lot of folks have been, not necessarily scientific, let's say, okay, over the years, but I think they have become more important. And, we're seeing that because folks are looking at, and I want your perspective on the whole COVID thing, but in our world, they're saying, hey, listen, let's look at what you did in 2019 and let's compare it to what your projections are and what you're doing in 2022 to see what normal would be. And then the middle part, the 20 and 21 with COVID, a lot of folks don't know how to handle it. So what are you seeing out there? I mean, what are you doing on the valuation side? Because you may see a company that routinely has EBITDA of $1.5 million during COVID, had 150,000 in EBITDA or 3 million, right? It could be either way.
Right. That when we're dealing with that in the valuation world, those are anomalies, right? So anomalies kind of get pushed to the side a little bit. They're addressed, but is that company going that will do the $1.5 million down to 150? Is that company going to stay at 150? You would hope that that was 2020, maybe the beginning of 21, and then you started to see things changing depending on the industry. Certain industries are very hot right now, as you well know, and private equity is really rolling things up. And then, the younger business buyers, they're out there, but what do they want? What are they looking to get involved in? So that's kind of how I see that piece of it, at least.
Yeah, we've had folks who basically, to a certain extent, some people discount what's happened during COVID, and they really are kind of like saying, look, let's just look at and make sure that going forward, some of your numbers make sense, that you restored yourself to whatever, normal would be for your company. And the personnel part that we started with is really impacting that, because a lot of folks can't project doing the same amount of business because they, quite frankly, can't find the help. So they have to look for, so now, you're looking for probably the most perfect organization who has the balance of the talent that they have and the perspective, the projected business. Do you see? I mean, do you see valuations? I mean, have they been pretty static over years? Have you seen them going? Have multiples in your mind increased?
On some levels, they have. And again, I'm going to go backwards to what the discount rate is, which is really where that multiple comes from. I just came back from Salt Lake City, the NACVA's Business Valuation Conference, and we're at a point now where it's kind of like the discount rate's like 18 to 22, but there was a point in time where that discount rate was like 16, 15, and then there was the other side of it where it was in the 20s. So it seems as though COVID, it's a blip, and you kind of have to adapt to that blip and make normalization adjustments based on realistic projections and asking the right questions in terms of what do they have. And you're right, good projections, if they're done internally, a lot of times there's not the skill set there. Sometimes the bigger accounting firms do really good projections with lots of variables, and that's kind of where we're looking at it to say, when we're doing the valuation and that valuation projection that we don't do, but that are given to us, well, how reasonable is this as a result of X, Y, and Z? And people is one of the biggest ones. Like, do you have the capacity that you used to have? And are you going to be able to do the same number of units or whatever? And then, of course, we won't even throw the inflation recession thing into it, which is kind of, risen all boats in terms of revenue numbers and not so much bottom line numbers, but a bottom line numbers a little bit. There's a little bit of greedflation out there for sure.
There's been a lot of unusual risk factors, and a lot of folks don't know how to evaluate them. Sometimes it's impacting the terms of a transaction. But one thing I got to tell you is we advise every client to say, hey, listen, do you have a valuation? Do you have a formal valuation? And they look at us and they go, well, I've never really needed one. And I said, well, first of all, let's assume they're not partners where they really should have had one, right, on a regular basis, because they have a partnership agreement or a buy, sell, or anything like that. I go, you really need to know, what your business is worth. I mean, do you see folks more interested in that now than ever? I mean, we promote it, but, it's hard because people, they don't see the value of it. Maybe you could talk a little bit about what the value is and how maybe they can lever that a little bit.
Well, if you don't know where you are, how are you going to know where you want to go? So that's, and again, it's like the surgeon saying, you have to have surgery. So, but the value of evaluation is understanding where you are, identifying both the market drivers and the operational drivers, the systemic and the unsystemic risk pieces, and how you can improve to get more cash flow, increase the earnings. It's also a good idea to know where you are and use it as a bench or a base mark. Like, if we want to go from here to here, how are we going to get from here to here? How do we get from point A to point B? And how do we measure that? And that's ultimately what the valuation will do. Most owners, it's like, well, I got more money in my bank, or I've got more cash aside. I was talking with somebody this week. He's like, yeah, I've got $1 million in the bank, and I'm very comfortable right now. For a $9 million business to have $1 million in reserves, he's like, we're doing really well. But the other side of it is interest rates are going up, and that's going to affect my business. So
the other thing we tell them, hey, listen, the buyer, if you look in the market, your business, the buyer is going to do evaluation. They're going to do a quality of earnings. If depending on the size of the business, they're going to look at some third-party representative numbers. They're going to give them a good idea of what that company's worth. They're not going to take your word for it. So we said, you got to, I wouldn't say go in fighting, but go in with some knowledge. And we like clients that are knowledgeable. And I say to them, and here's a plug, really, it's a small investment. It's a relatively small investment. If it's funny, if you have a business that's, your EBIT is a couple of $1 million a year, and you have to invest in evaluation, it's a rounding error almost on your P&L.
Exactly.
Relatively speaking.
And it's a P&L item. Yes, it's coming out of your pocket, but that goes back to, pound wise and penny foolish, I think we call that, right? Or our parents.
Penny wise and pound foolish, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So I was dyslexic on that, but yeah, but again, people don't want to spend money that they perceive as it should be theirs.
I also think it reveals a lot to you too, because some of the questions that you have to ask are questions we ask, and if they would just actually have some perspective on some of those questions, whether it be the management or leadership team, or maybe it's concentration of customers, which we see a lot of. And then you see there are a lot of folks who have, crummy financials.
Oh, yeah.
And you have to, when you're thinking about your largest asset, which is your business, the least you could have a good financial statement, so that when somebody wants to see it, whether you want to borrow money, if that comes to pass, when somebody wants to buy the company, you really should at least have that, have well-rounded information for them so that they're ready to go. But I think that makes sense. We're almost at the end. I want to give you the last word, Todd.
Well, thank you very much for having me. First off, working with business owners is it's become my passion. It's become my joy. It's the reason I get out of bed in the morning. I love helping people find both personal and business freedom. We call it freedompreneur, right? Because everybody gets into business for a better reason, or I believe that everyone gets into business for a better reason. If you ask a business owner, why'd you get into business? To have some freedom, to be able to do the things I want to do. Yeah. Unfortunately, sometimes the business becomes the ball and chain. So the opportunity to help business owners like that is something that I relish and I cherish. Again, finding those people that are open to having a conversation about what's next and what's the plan for the exit, and how are you going to grow, and how are you going to surround yourself with people that understand what you're going through, have probably or possibly dealt with what you're going through. The alternative board, you don't talk to these things about your business with your spouse so much as you do with other business owners. So
sure. And then people, how can they reach you? Just so tabny.com
is the alternative board or New York's website. And I'm Todd toddr actually at tabny.com. And my cell phone, 516-317-2856. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on all the social medias.
That's great. And anybody needs to get Todd can get me. And look, our goal here doing these shows is really provide great information, which I appreciate Todd providing. And I jokingly, in a way, say you don't want to end up with really a firm grasp on an empty bag. But sometimes, if you are not paying attention, you're not getting evaluation, you're not paying attention to your financials, you may actually not realize that the bag isn't as full as you think. And I think I say that like tongue in cheek to a certain extent, but I really look, our goal here at NYBB is the same as Todd's. We want to help the business owner maximize the value of what is their largest asset. And really, we want them to really realize that benefit, because they should, after working 30 or 40 years, or even if it's fewer years than that, they should be able to go on their boat. They should be able to go on vacation. They should be able to go and realize the benefits of working hard. It's not just like a normal job would be. It's really a commitment. It's a life commitment to you. And please just pay attention. If we can be of any assistance at all, we're here at the NYBB Group to help you. We have, I'm one of 3 partners. We have 7 intermediaries. We have a full staff. We can help you. We're in Melville. We take care of clients throughout the country. And we work with great professionals like Todd Ringler. Todd, thank you again. And everyone, have a great day. And we'll see you next time. Stay there, Todd.